Friday the 13th, Part 5 is dubbed The New Beginning, but a lot of fans weren't buying it. This week, we're talking about the entry and some other potential new beginnings that could have been offered. My name's Brian J., and this is Horror Reanimated. What's up, everybody? Brian J. Another episode of Horror Reanimated is going down right now. This is the Pseudo Echo. His Eyes, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, instrumental hip-hop beat. I didn't write the title. They did. By Cashflow Productions. So, search Stretch Money on YouTube. All I did was put in His Eyes, Pseudo Echo, hip-hop. I just want to keep this rolling. I don't want to turn it off. That's a good song to begin with. All right, we got to get on with it here. So this week, actually last week, when I dropped the new episodes of Wrestling Reanimated and Horror Reanimated, I also dropped the latest horror history video on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, search Brian J's Horror History. There was an episode on, obviously, Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. And I obviously go into some of the negatives of the entry, but I also defend it somewhat because I feel like if you look at the film, other than Roy and other than some of the corniness to some of the characters, it's really in the same vein as the early Friday films. In fact, after Part 5, I would argue that they don't really get it back. You know, things are much different, and it's much more... I mean, it was formulaic at that point, to be sure, to be 100% honest. But in some ways, this film is as much a Friday the 13th film as some of the others. So if you want to check that out, you can go to Horror History, Brian J's Horror History on YouTube. Excuse me. You can contact me by email at bshowbrian@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at bshowbrian. And now you can go to Horror Reanimated on Facebook, facebook.com/Horror Reanimated. Gee, isn't that just nice and easy to remember? It's very convenient, ain't it? No, I sound like Bugs Bunny. Come on. But again, this week we're talking about Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, coinciding with the video I just put up. Back in, for those of you who don't know, back in 1984, producers were feeling the heat of the general public. And even based on box office, in hindsight, Friday the 13th had peaked with Part 4. And in 1984, Frank Mancuso Jr., who was the executive producer and kind of continuing to champion this franchise along, was, again, feeling the heat of parents groups, watchdog groups, protesters, what have you. And also feeling like they'd done everything they could with Jason, which is a fair point. Decided to kill off Jason and revisit it at another time. The only issue is that the movie industry is a business. It's about money, obviously. And Friday the 13th, the final chapter, gave Paramount Pictures a few dozen $1 million. I fucked that up. I was going to say a few dozen million reasons to continue the franchise. So that's where A New Beginning came from. Mancuso wanted to distance himself from horror, so he stepped back and took on a more ceremonial executive producer role. And left a lot of the decisions in other people's hands, like the late Danny Steinman, who was the director and I believe has a writing credit on the film, which is where we get the Imposter Jason and all this stuff. So this is going to be, again, a little bit more free-flowing, not as structured as usual, but I'm just going to talk about the film a little bit. I'm going to weave in and out of the film itself and things I think that really worked and could have been augmented or amplified to really give something different. But obviously, for those of you who've seen the film, spoiler alert on a 40-year-old movie. 35, actually. 35 years this year. Wow. 35th anniversary. Got a lot of good timing for my stuff here. But for those of you who don't know and haven't seen it, it was an imposter. It wasn't really Jason. So basically, Tommy from Part 4 who killed Jason. Jason's dead. He's been institutionalized. He goes to a halfway house, which coincidentally is located around Crystal Lake. Which that's going to come into play a little bit later. Which seems like a fucking great idea. Take Tommy and send him back to where all this trauma happened to try to get better. And he's at this halfway house, and someone gets murdered there by another inmate. And some Jason-style murders start happening again. The police officer, the sheriff thinks it's Jason, the mayor. In what I thought was a nice touch, although it goes unnoticed. There's a lot of things about this film that go unnoticed. The mayor was very much like the mayor in Jaws. He was not denying that murders were happening, but the sheriff who actually kind of resembled Sheriff Brody in a way. Reminded me of Sheriff Brody from Jaws. The sheriff thinks it's Jason. Jason's back from the dead. Who else is it? I've got bodies piling up and no answers. And the mayor is just like, all right, take care of it, get rid of it. So that was kind of interesting. But essentially, they don't know what to think. And lo and behold, we find out at the end that the killer was Roy Burns. I believe his last name is Burns. The paramedic who shows up at the halfway house to collect the pieces of whatever was left of poor Joey, who had been murdered when Tommy arrived. Not by Tommy, by another inmate that he annoyed. Joey annoyed. But Roy was his father, and Joey had been orphaned, and blah, 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 blah. It was strange. The interesting thing is, what I never caught on to until after I dug in to do the video for Brian J's Horror History you can find on YouTube. Shameless plug there. The one thing I never caught before was how much it really circled back to the original film. The Friday the 13th, and I say this in the video, the Friday the 13th franchise, at its core, is really about avenging the loss of a loved one. In the first film, she's crazy, but Pamela Voorhees is killing counselors and trying to shut down and sabotage the camp because she doesn't want the same thing to happen to someone else's kid that happened to hers. She's no different than, I don't know. Well, not no different. Obviously, she's crazy. But she has a lot in common with very overprotective mothers. So, look at John Walsh. John Walsh's son was abducted from a Sears store or a chain mall, a strip mall, was murdered. And he spent the rest of his life trying to make sure this didn't happen to other kids, finding lost kids, finding wanted fugitives. I mean, he really has dedicated his life. I can't tell you the last time. I was always an Unsolved Mysteries guy, but I can't tell you the last time I watched America's Most Wanted, or even if it's still on. But in spirit, how is that different? I mean, I understand she was insane and her methods were far different. But really, how is that spirit any different than what John Walsh does? I mean, it's all, or the families of people like Kristen Smart that raise money and set up golf tournaments and stuff to raise support, awareness, and funds to prevent other people from being murdered. And that's, in that regard, it's in the same vein. She was just nuts. And it wasn't necessarily just about protecting. It was about the vengeance. So now that I've gone all the way around the block, or all the way around the woods or the lake in this instance, to make that point, and then again in the second film, in the third film, Jason returns to avenge his murdered mother, or her severed head anyway. But it's all about avenging the loss of a loved one. Taking the law into your own hands, trying to prevent other people. She was about prevention and revenge. He was about revenge. No, there's no two ways about it. So, Roy was the father of Joey. He was out to avenge the loss of his son. I know with it being a whodunit and trying to keep everyone guessing, they couldn't just come in and say it was Roy the ambulance driver. They hint to it pretty heavily. And to be fair, I can't tell you if I caught on, because when I watched it, I was 5 years old. I was scared out of my mind. It was the first horror movie I'd ever watched. So I can't tell you what I was thinking at the time, other than just being terrified and not really knowing what's going on. Actually, I can. I'll tell you, I was so confused. I thought when I was a kid that if you put Jason's mask on, you become Jason. I didn't understand because I was 5. I didn't understand that Roy had made a mask to look like Jason. I thought it was Jason when he had the mask on. He became Jason. I thought the mask was cursed, which is something else that they could have explored in the series. Is maybe the evil of Jason being passed on. Maybe the mask, like I'm trying to think of other films that would have done this, but cursed objects. Maybe what Jason had done was so terrible and carrying on this evil. You can become infected in some way by taking the mask. But that's what I thought when I was 5 when I watched it. And I thought this guy put the mask on, became Jason, and because the mask fell off at the end, I thought that he turned back into whoever he was. I didn't get that there was a hood mask around his head. I thought he died. Almost like, and I think it was because this is the first horror movie I sat down and watched. I had seen pieces of An American Werewolf in London, and when David gets shot, he turns back into David. He's not a werewolf anymore. So maybe that warped my understanding of it, because I saw it, I think, 6 months or a year before I saw Friday the 13th. So I'm not sure, but that was my recollection of it at the time. I didn't understand Imposter and all this stuff. I just thought it was Jason. And then Tommy puts the mask on. So almost like being drawn to it as if it's this powerful, almost like Jumanji. Jason's mask is the Jumanji board of the horror world. This powerful relic, almost, and it's funny, kind of like the doctor in Jason Goes to Hell. The heart is speaking to him. He's possessed by it. He eats it, and you become Jason. So it's kind of weird how I thought that, given how they did it later on, or even in Halloween 4, the idea of Jamie touching her uncle's hand. Not that I have to bring everything back to Halloween, but how the evil was infectious, right? And she essentially caught it. So that was obviously something I thought they did, or even could do with the film. They didn't seem to do that. The one thing I never understood is if Mancuso wanted to get away from Jason and horror, why they didn't just bring Jason back to begin with. I mean, it seems that simple. Other than, Jason, they've done all they could with Jason. but they still had a killer dressed like Jason. Someone, as a Jason imposter. I don't know. I guess I just answered my own question in a sense, but I mean, it's still in the same vein. What difference does it make if it's Jason or not? I mean, I know they wanted Tommy to be the killer, but I don't know. Just a lot of stuff didn't make sense. And as good as I thought the movie was, and I still think it holds up in some ways, A New Beginning could have been much different. And I was just kind of thinking on this while thinking of an idea for another episode. In fact, this was a last minute decision. I wasn't going to do this episode, then I was going to do something else. But I was thinking, if you go to New Beginning, instead of kind of fooling everybody, which is what they did, people thought it was Jason, or could have been Jason. Why Tommy never went and tried to dig up the grave, I don't know. Just to see if he was still there or not. That would have really solved a thing or two. No, never mind. They said he was cremated. But then you still could have seen his ashes. So then, anyway. What I was thinking was, if you're looking for a new direction for Part 5 and you don't want it to be Jason, right? You have survivors. We know poor Alice didn't survive. We know that. But you have Ginny. You have Chris Higgins. You have Tommy. You might have had Pam, although I'm sorry, not Pam. Tommy's sister, Trish. So if you had gone, if you look at the way Ginny, the end of her journey is left, and the way Chris is left, all three of the survivors, as far as we know, except for Trish, the three survivors are institutionalized. They go crazy. This is a stretch, but I was thinking, what if they took those three survivors and instead of doing a halfway house for just random people, what if these three were all in the same facility? Because let's be honest, Crystal Lake, it's, they show there's an area, a town there, even though it's small. Tommy's halfway house was there. Unger Institute, which is what his institution was called, was supposedly close by. Because if not, then the orderlies wouldn't have been able to been killed, because it had to be in close proximity. So you would think if these crimes were committed in this area and these people were institutionalized, that it may have been close by. So you may have had an instance where you have Ginny and you have Chris and you have Tommy all in the same institution. And maybe the three of each other know each other. Then you bring those characters close to what they alluded to in, I guess, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, although I don't want to be too derivative here. Take them back to Crystal Lake. Now the three of them have to confront together the memory of Jason. But then once they return, similar to what's going on with Tommy, shit starts happening. And if you still want it to be Tommy, that's great. But almost like, and maybe right now it's because I'm being shaped by what's going on in the world. People are paranoid of each other. We're paranoid of people from outside the country, people traveling. We go to the store. If someone's not wearing a mask, oh, they must be sick. If someone coughs, holy shit, it's World War III. There's a lot of paranoia going on around right now with the current COVID situation, right? To me, that's ripe for films like The Thing, right? But in this case, it's just inspiring me to do something like that. So take the dynamic of The Thing, where you have these characters, these survivor characters, And maybe you have Paul, you have Ginny, you have Chris. I'm trying to think, was there anyone else in part 3 who lived? No. And then you have maybe Trish and Tommy. Except that would be kind of tough to do, because if Tommy was grown up, then... No, because Tommy was supposed to be little Tommy, except for he had to go do the Goonies. So yeah, you got little Tommy, so maybe it's in real time. And you can even do some interesting stuff where like some shit starts happening and everyone swears it's Jason and they're going crazy. And then maybe the sheriff does drive him out to the grave. There he is. He's maggot food. He's been there all this time. And maybe it would be interesting to see the interaction between Ginny and Chris and Tommy. Because Ginny and Chris thought they killed him. Or at least Ginny thought he got away. Chris thought she killed him. But they're probably non-believing because of what happened. Maybe they've heard about the trial or know what happened. And I guess there wouldn't be trials because he was never caught. But to me, that whole Survivor thing, that makes more sense to me than a bunch of random people. And you could still have the dynamic of, maybe it is a halfway house, so maybe you have other people staying there. But at least you have 3 or 4 richer characters. Characters that you've already followed, characters that you know, that all have similar qualities, but they're different. Ginny's a psychology major. Chris is, all-American girl, and Tommy was a kid. So they have to come together to try to fight whatever this is. But as things start to continue on, you wonder if one of them, which one of them is doing it. Not if one of them, but which one of them is doing it. And you could even do, maybe it's Ginny. Maybe it's Chris. And then after whoever it is found out, maybe Tommy still goes crazy. Who knows? But the Survivor thing was kind of interesting to me. But now that when I was talking about it earlier, a few minutes ago, when I thought of the infectious mask type thing, that almost like a contagion, like it goes from person to person. That's really fascinating to me. Because with the mask, almost like the movie The Mask, which now I'm kind of regretting suggesting, but it's not only would it be almost like a haunted object calling to you, like a beacon, something that you can't control. It's almost like an impulse. But think of the immense power. So let's say you're someone who's sadistic and you can get your hands on that mask. Let's say you're a mass murderer. You get your hands on that mask, you become Jason, or at least, I don't know, you think you're Jason? I don't know how that would work. Maybe you get whatever powers, maybe it's demonic, maybe it's possessed. Jason never dies, so maybe even if they cremate him, his spirit is forever tied to the mask. And then I guess that would give you, if you wanted to turn it into some paranormal thing, maybe the way you defeat Jason is to destroy the mask. That would make sense to me. Then you fight the floating mask, like Jason's mom's head in the Friday the 13th Nintendo game. Pew pew pew. Or you destroy the mask, and then the swerve at the end is the potato sack pops up. Anyway, someone finds it, stores their potatoes in it, and then a legion of mutated potatoes, killer, unkillable mutant potatoes. Anyway, I'm loopy. So I don't know. I'm kind of liking the haunted mask type thing. That's something to me that seems like it's a little more ancient. That to me sounds like, the type of story that has been passed down through the ages. Not only the temptation of power, but also like a haunted relic. and a mask. I mean, for God's sakes, how long have tribes been wearing masks and using masks? Could you have this one that is Jason's, and not that you say, you know, it's possessed by some, what is it, Zulu? What was the one from The Exorcist? Yeah, so not like the mask would be Pazuzu. Not that it would be itself possessed by a specific demon. Maybe it's just the spirit of Jason. Maybe it's the spirit of Jason, the spirit of Pamela. Maybe, you know, and maybe you get into the lineage of Jason, and that's when you bring forth Elias, I believe was his father's name. And maybe Elias was like this really bad dude. And Pamela was crazy. And Jason was their offspring. So the three of them have this weird sort of spiritual, this twisted spirit, where as they die, they become conjoined and twisted into one sort of force of nature in a way. That's really interesting now. Or maybe Elias, maybe part 5, they're fighting against the spirit of Jason and Elias comes back. You know, so maybe Trish doesn't die. Maybe Tommy ends up killing Chris and Ginny and putting the mask on. And then when all this happens, Trish is like, I don't believe it. Or maybe, because here's the thing. If Tommy essentially becomes Jason or takes on his MO, would he kill Trish? Or would he see her as something sacred? Because it's his sister. It's his family. Like Jason and Pamela. How would that work? Or would he technically be driven insane to where he thinks he's Jason? Or would he worship Pamela in a way? Because he thinks Pamela's... Oh, man, then you could even get into, and again, this new beginning, we're talking about, you know, further chapters, but the idea would be maybe Elias comes back and he knows how to fight them. Or how to defeat them, and he's a bad guy, but the police are trying to make him help them. And then when Elias dies, he ends up becoming entwined too and trapped. Or every time something like that happens, the power of the mask or the power of the Voorhees or the power of Jason, it grows because it just keeps absorbing and continuing this evil. That's interesting too. It'd be weird to show that and to try to sell it on screen, like to explain it. But I really like that idea. Or the other thing too is, you know, as things go on, the mask would become some sort of black magic relic. So, you know, if you look at John Carpenter's vampires, the vampire hunters were hired by the Vatican. They were run by the Vatican. And the Vatican had their relics, and there was a black cross that Valak ended up stealing, and it was going to allow him to walk during the day and be the most powerful vampire of all time. And in that case, if you look at Jason and the mask would itself become almost a worshipped relic, and you could eventually have like an entire like dark church or not congregation. What am I thinking? It could be worshipped almost and it would fall right in line with Satanic Panic of the 80s, by the way. For those of you who don't know, it was very popular for cops and parents to blame the devil on shit in the 80s. It was always because of a satanic cult or because of black magic. I mean, it was really just their kids playing Dungeons and Dragons and shit, listening to metal music and wearing black t-shirts. But in this case, see, to me, that's when you think you've done everything you can with Jason. Now you're taking the series in a completely new direction. You're not cheapening out with an imposter and then just turning Tommy into Jason. Because if you look if you look at, even with reboots today, people love original movies because they love that movie, that scenario. It hit at a certain time in their life. I think the slasher craze was kind of over, although Part 5 still did really big business. I think it like 32 or 35 million, and Final Chapter had done like 38. But in this case, you're deepening the mythology. You're not cheapening the mythology. I like that. And you're making it almost a religious experience or a paranormal story. I could see in 1,000 years the future version of Indiana Jones, almost like they did in Jason X, excavating a cave and finding this mask. And as he finds this mask, things start to shake and rumble, and he turns it around, and as he turns it around and puts it on, red light shoots out from his face, and he's whatever. Whatever. But yeah, I like that better than Roy. I mean, I think the Roy thing, and I think I said this on the video, I think once you know Roy's the killer, and you watch the film again, it's more enjoyable. Because if you go into the film like trying to figure out who it is or thinking it's Tommy, and the whole Roy thing is a letdown. And like I said, even going back and connecting things with the first film by having the film be about a father or a parent going out and avenging the death of their child, it just falls flat, and it's really a disappointment if you're watching it for the first time. Especially if you watch the other Friday the 13th films and follow the series. The other interesting thing, too, that also calls back to the first one, is the cook. I don't remember his name, but it's Reggie's grandfather, right? There's a lot of the theme of family within this film is very good. Very, very much apparent, I should say. So, apparent. Get it? Parent? Waka waka. Jesus. I gotta stop doing this shit so late. Anyway, those themes run throughout this whole franchise, but specifically in this film. You have Reggie and his grandpa, Reggie and his brother Demon. With a name like Demon, why he wouldn't become... there's so many different avenues, and again, these characters probably created after they decided what to do. But if you could have had the cook as Reggie's dad instead of Reggie's grandfather, well then maybe with all this crazy shit going on and Tommy kills people, maybe Reggie's father would end up becoming the new killer. You know what I mean? But to me, when I look at what they were trying to accomplish here, I know they were trying to move things along and make Tommy the new killer. But after 4 films with Jason as the killer, I really don't see how you could have gotten past that, or how anyone would have thought you could have gotten past it. And history repeats itself, which is why I was thinking about it'd be interesting if the cook, loses a kid, and like because if you think about it like this, if something would happen to Reggie and his father or mother is the cook there, this is all happening all over again, and it would kind of vindicate Pamela, at least her motives anyway. Not what she did, obviously, and Jason's. But now here you have a new beginning, and it would be history repeating itself. It would be a whole new circle, everything coming full circle, and a film that was full of bringing things back to the original film. Pamela's original idea was to prevent this from happening to anybody else. And, according to her, if she didn't step in, it would continue to happen. But now, because she has stepped in and intervened, it will now continue to happen forever. So that's the interesting thing too, and that speaks to the notion, not to get philosophical, but the notion of, evil begets evil. Some bad shit is just going to happen. And sometimes doing other things to prevent it is just going to make other bad shit happen. It's just a fact of life. So it's kind of interesting that here you are, 5 films in. The original film, she was trying to prevent young, people from dying. And that's the ironic thing too, I guess. If you look back at the first film, she claims she was trying to prevent. See, now this goes back. Oh man, this goes to the motive of Pamela. If she was just using it to justify. She goes back and she says she's doing this to prevent other kids from getting killed, but she's killing other kids. That's interesting to ponder. But A New Beginning, 1985, was a letdown. We scratched the surface here on something that I think is very interesting and may warrant a future episode. See, that's what I like about doing these original ones where we just kind of, and I hate to call it a pitch room, but when we just kind of sit and I throw shit out there, and hopefully I can have other people on with me down the road to talk about stuff like this, then throw ideas back and forth and get a little bit more into things or flesh things out, banter things back and forth. But in this case, like, I love doing this stuff because I started last minute, threw together, after my video, I wanted to do something with Friday 5. It was inspired by another idea I had, and now here I am. Now I'm thinking about, what if the mask was like a relic or became this force of nature? Because you can't explain why Jason can't die. You can't explain, other than him just being Mrs. Voorhees' special boy. I mean, he's driven by something paranormal, something otherworldly. If you can't kill him and you remove his physical form, will that force transfer into something else? And can that force be transferred into someone else? That's the interesting thing. That to me, that goes so much deeper than just continuing on the tradition of killing people who, out of vengeance for a loved one. Although that's in line with the series, I like the more paranormal aspect of it, because it kind of, after 4 or 5 entries, it's like, all right, how is this shit going to keep going on? So, no, man, I'm glad we did this. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for checking out Horror Reanimated. Again, you can find us on Facebook.com/HorrorReanimated. You can follow me on Twitter at bshowbrian, on Instagram at bshowbrian. You can contact me at bshowbrian@gmail.com, and you can find this show and Wrestling Reanimated, if you like wrestling what-if scenarios and discussion, at bshowpodcast.com. But this show and the other one. So that's it for this week. I want to know, though, if you have any suggestions for where you would have taken the franchise. So if you were executive producer, or if you were the writer, if you're Danny Steinman, whatever. And I hope not, because you would have been very high if you were Danny Steinman. But what would you have done if producers said, look, we need a new Friday, we need people being killed, we need this similar formula, but Jason's dead, and we want to turn Tommy into the series' new killer? What do we do? Or what's your counter pitch like this for a different idea? What do you do? Let me know. Like I said, Facebook.com/WrestlingReanimated, or email me at bshowbrian@gmail.com. I'm out of here. It's getting late. I got to edit and get some sleep. Hope everyone is doing good. Again, thanks for continuing to check us out and support us. If you like the show, wherever you listen to it, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Please leave us a rating. It helps us stay visible to people and to attract more listeners, which only helps us out. So, again, thank you very much. My name is Brian J. This is Horror Reanimated.